Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row. Thanks so much for listening to the following broadcast, courtesy of Public House Media.
Disarming Disability.
Hi, I'm Nicole Kelly, and I'm a speaker and an activist.
And hi, I'm Sarah Tuberty. I'm an occupational therapy student, a flight attendant, and an aerial artist.
We both live with a disability. We both were born with a congenital limb difference and are hosts of a new podcast, Disarming Disability, coming to you on Public House Media.
So come learn, explore, and understand disability so we can deconstruct these social stigmas and really build a more inclusive society.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or at publichousemedia.org. Come hang out with us every Wednesday. Also follow us on Twitter at DisarmDisable, Instagram and Facebook at Disarming Disability, and check out our website at disarmingdisability.com.
Bye!
Hey everybody, welcome and thank you for joining the Confessions of a Military Spouse podcast. I am your host, Jenna Burt. I'm a military spouse for almost 10 years, a health and fitness enthusiast, a mom and dental assistant. If you are new to my show, welcome and thank you for tuning in. If you are a regular listener, I just want to extend a very, very warm thank you for continuing to listen to our show every other week. I am very excited about today's episode because I have another guest on our show. I'm super excited about the work that she is doing and that she does. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Tia with Dependent.Work. And Tia, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining me. I know you guys can't see this, but it is super early while we're recording this. So thank you for getting up. Thank you for spending your time with us. And why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what it is you do, and we can go from there.
Hi. Thank you for having me on your show, Jenna. This is Tia, like Jenna said, from Dependent.Work. I am a now going on almost 10-year military spouse. Wow, the time's passed so fast. And I am an HR professional, and that's, I've been able to, luckily for me, I've been able to have continuity in my career, but I know a lot of military spouses don't have that opportunity. And so from that, Dependent.Work was born. And Dependent.Work is a resource, a tool, educational, like anything you want it to be as a military spouse, a support. For career guidance and advice. And the goal of Dependent.Work is to make more workplaces military friendly. And that's to employ military spouses, number one, and also making sure our transitioning veterans get employment as well.
Yes.
So that's really me in a nutshell.
I love it. And one of the things that totally drew me to Tia is the fact that she's trying to bridge that gap for working spouses. I'm a working spouse myself, and I feel like sometimes it's really, really hard to find jobs. And I'm sure Tia experiences this or has seen this because a lot of employers, I feel like, are scared to hire military spouses because they know that we're going to be moving a lot. And to be honest, whenever I have to turn in my resume to somewhere new, whenever we move, I always have like a little bit of a fear because my resume is not, it's consistent, but every 2 to 3 years it's showing that I'm moving. And that in general, employers don't really like, but then depending on the place that you are, they generally put 2 and 2 together that you're a military spouse. And for me, it instills a little bit of fear.
And, it's so crazy you say that to me because last night I was at the Military Spouse Professional Network group. And if you have a network group that's close to you, I advocate going and attending. It's not only is it great resourcing, but it's also a great support system if you're trying to maintain your career. But the thing is that I heard a lot of people that were saying that same thing. They had there was like a fear based around continuing your career. And I've had the totally opposite experience where I've had really great support as a military spouse. So it's really, I think, one, about aligning your values with the company that you're working with. Two, there's this big thing about military spouses moving every 2 to 3 years. And that's Oliver. He's our co-host.
I love it.
My 2-year-old's up and awake. And I think may not be feeling well, so he wants to be with mom. But
and that's life.
Right? That's part of a military spouse life, and also working a mom.
Yes.
Gig. So I think number two, there's this myth about military spouses and that, oh my gosh, or it's not a myth. I mean, it's true. We move frequently, but the thing about it is the actual employment population is also only working 2 to 3 years at one company. It's the climate of our environment right now. And as a recruiter by trade, like that's something I have to combat with, regardless of it, if it's a military spouse or somebody who's supposedly living in this state for a long time. Like they're going to bounce between jobs. I live in Vegas. Vegas is a very nomadic environment. You can see that people have bounced from casino to casino to casino, and probably that's due to compensation. And one of my examples is that when I interview people, and if I saw a gap and somebody explained it to me as, well, you know, we're a military family and we were stationed in a remote location for 2 years where the employment economy was not there for me to continue my career. And during that time, I got a certification, or I was online doing. Sorry, I apologize.
Don't be sorry.
Let me put on super wings for him. All right. So if you explained it as like my 2-year gap, like I said, was I was in a remote location. There was the economy there didn't support me being able to sustain my career. And during that time, I got a certification, or I was studying XYZ. That to me goes a lot further than I change jobs every 1.5 years because they don't pay me enough. So it's all in how you frame that. And I do understand that the resume, you can format it so that that isn't as visible, you know, the 2 years here, 2 years there, or gaps. And if anybody is interested in me looking at the resume to say like, hey, like change the format here, here's how you should show your skills, I'm totally open to that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question actually, is if that's something that you can and want to do to help military spouses, is look at their resumes, because I'm sure mine needs a little bit of work. So I'll be sending it over. But I also feel like resumes in general can be a really hard thing to, you know, format and understand exactly what employers are looking for. So to kind of have that inside scoop, so to speak, I think that is amazing. And it's an awesome resource, especially for military spouses, because like you said, you can help them kind of make it cohesive. So it's not standing out like, boom, I was only here for 2 years. Here, I was only here for 3 years. I took this amount of time off. So it's not so very cut and dry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm always good at reviewing a resume and sending over format, say, hey, use this format, or saying, what's the industry you're looking at? Like, does your resume reflect that industry? So for certain, I have we have our third co-host that just woke up, my 5-year-old.
Yes.
So he was peering over my shoulder, and I'm like, somebody's staring at me.
You could just feel it, right?
I just feel it. Yeah, it's Bubba. It's okay. He's okay. Oh, okay. Jenna, just give me 1 second.
Of course.
We're having a little meltdown.
Of course.
Oliver, you're fine. Colin, do you want to go over in the other room and watch TV? Come here. Okay, come here. My 2-year-old's just learned to talk, so
Aww.
it's the words that he strings together like "mommy up."
Yeah, right.
Okay, where were we? Back to resumes.
Yes.
So, I'm really good at saying like, hey, let me look at the format. Let's reformat so let's show your skills up front. Or we can say, hey, what industry are you in? I had a military spouse, friend who's an instructional designer, and she was like, hey, I'm struggling, with getting interviews. And I said, first of all, let me look at your resume. I took the resume and I said, well, it's not reflecting your design skills. You know, that's a area where if you actually had more of a graphic resume, it makes sense because that shows them that you have the capabilities of being able to design something. It may not be in the same media as what you would be designing for instructional videos, but it still shows that creativity. So you need to change your resume to reflect that. Um, Based on the job, the industry, like whatever you're looking at, you have to be mindful of those components. And those are just things that I know as a recruiter that like most people don't know if it's not your livelihood. So I'm definitely open to looking at resumes and looking at LinkedIn. Make sure you have a LinkedIn. That's one of the best ways to connect professionally.
Well, that is great information to know because I personally do not have one, but I will surely make one now.
And definitely with a podcast, you should totally have a LinkedIn.
That's a really good piece of advice. I also find it really, really intriguing that you said how the normal workforce, civilians, their average time at a job is only 2 to 3 years as well. So it makes me wonder where this stigma, I guess, of being a military spouse and having that every 2 to 3 years on your resume was such a bad thing, where that came into play. Like who decided oh, this looks terrible on your resume?
So I think it's that you have to look at the evolution of career, right? So we used to have these careers where people stayed at the same job for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And as we evolve as a culture, as the generations evolve, they want different things out of a career. The career isn't their life anymore. It's a part of their life, but that's not their only thing. And so as people try to balance inequities, right? Pay inequities. So how do you do that? You bounce from job to job in order to increase your value. And so we just have naturally evolved from a community where, and it's sad to say this, right? There's not the loyalty of, you don't have a pension set up anymore. Like you're responsible for making sure you're set for retirement or whatever your, financial needs are. Companies just, naturally as we evolved from being this industrial society into a very capitalistic society, things have changed, and the business is no longer really responsible for the employee. Not that they don't value their employees, but it isn't the same, right? They make sure you have health benefits, you have those options of 401k. If they are a company that has stocks, you have the ability to buy stocks, but it's not just naturally given to you for most companies. Those are things you need to invest in for yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's changed us as like as an employment industry, is a cultural from a career standpoint. And so that's why it's changed to this affects everyone, not just the military spouse. But it's easier to pinpoint it with a military spouse, right? Like we already know how that rolls. Like we already know that it's going to be probably every 2 to 3 years you're going to move. And I think that's just been instilled, and that's just something that we have to get out of. It's fear-based, and it's not something that's always realistic. I've been blessed with my last employer I worked at for 6 years. My current employer I've been at for 2 years, and hopefully can be there longer. And we are trying to be strategic about seeing how long I can be where I'm at, because the opportunities are great for me as well. So, you have to have the employer that understands that there's the value in the community, and there's great value in our community. When the employment rate looks like 26% for underemployment and unemployment, and you look at the value of, degreed individuals within our community, it's such a great talent pool that needs to be championed and lifted up. And employers are missing out if you bury your head in the sand and say, like, hey, I don't want to deal with it because they're only going to be here for 2 to 3 years. Well, if I have a company, I want that person that's going to move the needle. I don't care how long they're going to be there, but if they have a true impact on the business, that will sustain.
Yes, absolutely. And you make some really great points. I've been very blessed with the job that I currently have. I was with this employer previously. I moved for about a year. It's a really long story, but, she took a chance on me, and I am always very upfront whenever I interview about the fact that I'm a military spouse, and she took a chance on me, and she had the same mindset. Listen, I know you're only going to be here for a couple of years, but I feel like you can do big things for the company in those couple of years that you're here. And to me, that's worth it.
Mm-hmm. But that makes you want to work there, right? Like that makes you feel comfortable. Like when talking to certain military spouses and they say they feel like they need to hide a portion that's so large, because being a military spouse is a large part of your life. It isn't everything, but when you have to go to events and it's at 5:00 in the afternoon and you get off at 5:30, how are you supposed to let go early when you need to get dressed, you need to get ready, when you're not telling your employer why you have to leave a few hours, like an hour or so earlier than usual?
Yes, absolutely.
And then you become a flaky employee that's, has this weird secret life, right?
Yes, I'm laughing about it, but you're right. It's so true. And there are so many people that do that. And me personally, I'm like, I can't really keep a secret, so I would not be able to hide that for sure. But like you said, it's so sad that military spouses especially feel like they have to do that because of the life that they live.
Yeah. Yeah, and you shouldn't have to feel like, I support one of the things that happened last night is one of the co-leads for the professional network. She was talking about that, like that same day, she works at a government contractor, and somebody found out she talked to them about who her husband was, and they were like, oh, well, Katie did a great job at planning this event, but did you know her husband is XYZ person to the general and did all this great stuff? And then she had to stop him and readjust that, because she's like, that's great, that's him, but I'm Katie, and this is what I do.
Yes.
And so I was like, it's very powerful how you balance that, the identity part of being a military spouse, with also your professional identity.
Yes.
Because we love to talk about what our husbands do, our wives. I don't want to leave out the male spouses, because it is cool. They are defending our country. They are, they do these cool jobs that are not normal. My husband is a weapon system specialist. That is not a job that translates to civilian life, and it's cool. So he plays with weapons. I'm like, yes, he does. And he plays with jets. Yes, he does. The people want to know more, but it's also about, okay, let's redirect this back to who am I? Who am I as a professional? What can I bring to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like so many spouses, myself included, can go down almost like a rabbit hole of losing yourself and losing your identity because you're a military spouse, because your spouse is doing amazing things. And I know one of the things for me, I just, in general, love working. I'm in the dental field, and I love helping people feel good about themselves. And I love it. I, to be honest, never had a desire to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's fine. But another thing of that was that I didn't want to lose my identity as Jenna. I wanted to continue to be Jenna. I am Jenna. I am a dental assistant. And when my husband was on recruiting duty, I was obviously working, and I would go into his office, and his, employees would be like, Mrs. Burt or ma'am or whatever. And I know they have to say those things, but I would always look at them and I would say, listen, I get that you have to say this and I respect that, but I am Jenna and I am an individual. Because I feel like it oftentimes gets lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, my dad was in the Navy, and then my brother was in the Air Force. So, and it's different when you're a sister and a child in the military, right? Like, you don't know any better. So
Right.
you don't, and the exposure I had was so limited. So it was kind of a culture shock when you come into it and you're like, first of all, don't call me ma'am. Like, I'm 20.
Right?
Like, that's uncomfortable. Second of all, I'm like this badass. Like, let's talk about it. Look what I do. I have 2 degrees. Like, I'm making a difference in the world. Like, this is me. So this is what he does, but this is what I do. And I remember, like, that was me when I first became a military spouse, because we didn't have kids either. So you have that, like, you have that whole thing too. And it's like this, when you don't have the kids, you don't have anything to talk about. And then if you find you're in a group of women that are stay-at-home moms, which is totally fine, but they don't have an identity, and they want to, and then you have this awkward, like, very strong identity. It's like bridging that gap and trying, and then I would find myself, just because it's natural to who I am, being like, you would be so great at this. How about we work towards doing this? Like, you want a career, we're going to make it happen. But that's not what everybody wants. And sometimes, like, the only identity they have, they know based on the military. And it's that balance, right? It's the balance between us as military spouses, us as part of the military community. Like, there's all these layers to it. And I just think it's so great. I love finding like-minded women that are like, hey, like, I want to do this career thing, but I also have learned since having children how to connect with people who are like, no, I just want to nurture the family until I get to that point of having, yes, he found some film.
He is excited about that.
Till I get to the point that my kids are raised, and then I'll figure out what's for me. And I think that's great. Like, I think that's the cool thing about this community, is there's a little bit of something for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But you made a really great point about, these spouses who maybe don't have this identity, and how you have this strong identity, and just wanting to help them and wanting to empower them and let them know, like, hey, you don't have to succumb to the surroundings around you. Just because you're a military spouse and you're a mom doesn't mean you can't be an individual too. And it's people like that we as military spouses in this community need a lot more of, because there are so many spouses that don't work. Whether it's financial reasons, whether it's because they want to stay home and nurture their family, which is fine, or maybe it's because they don't know who they are or what they want, but they also don't feel like they have the resources or the means or the needs to figure that out. So to know that there's somebody out there that is supporting that role, basically, and empowering them to, hey, find your identity. If that's what you want to do, find it. Go do it.
Definitely. I feel like, so before we PCS, so this was my first PCS, and I knew that I wanted to help support from a career aspect. Like I said, like, it was something that was inside of me, and I was like, I've always had that, I need to do more. Like, there's more I can be helping. So I was always a key spouse. I've always been a key spouse, because that was one way I could give back. But I felt like, as I saw my friends who were either staying behind to keep the continuity in their careers, or still lost and figuring out what their careers were, I was like, I have that resource to help. Why not help? And it just kind of evolved. And so once we hit PCS, I was even stronger about it, because the move for me was smoother, not necessarily the circumstances of the move, but as far as, like, getting a job. Like, we moved here in November, I had a job in December. Like, it went really fast. But I feel like after that move, I understood all the stress of the PCSing in combination of trying to keep the continuity of career. But because I did it so smoothly, I felt like this is something I need to help others with. So then I developed out like, okay, here's what Dependent.Work is going to look like, and this is what I'm going to do. And then I was like, well, I'm going to attend this conference. Why not? This sounds fun. So I was online and I was like, oh, military influencers. This sounds like something I need to get involved with. And so I went to the Military Influencer Conference last September, and that's where my world opened up to all these people that are just making a difference in the community. So then I started connecting with them, and then I started getting into social. And then it's like, all right, there's this rabbit hole of all these military spouses we can connect with and just see what they're doing, whether that's, business to business sales, or they're making stuff, or like you have a podcast as you're also doing your career on the side. I really like how I say that, your career on the side.
Yeah, right. I always joke about my real job and like my fake job, like I'm like, oh, my real job is this.
But it's just that it opened up, like, the internet is amazing, and it opens up all these resources, all these other people. And I think that that's where we as a community need to push people too, like to say like, hey, like if you feel like you're trapped in this on your little island, you don't have to be. The internet has made it possible that you don't have to be trapped in that island. You can still have this world beyond you, and you can make it fit into your world. You just have to find your niche.
Yes.
And that's just been a great thing, just to see how people are kicking butt at different things, whether that's volunteering or they're really good at crocheting, and they've made a whole line of different knit scarves and hats and whatever it is. That is, taking their financial situation to the next level, just by starting their own little business, or they're empowering others to do what they want to do. Like, it's just so cool.
Well, and there's so many spouses out there that everybody, I feel like, has a niche. Everybody is good at something. I mean, I cannot crochet to save my life, but I love crocheted things. So it's like everybody can benefit from everybody and what their niche is. It's just a matter of finding it and becoming that person and finding your identity. But if you don't have anybody to lift you up and empower you along the way, it makes it really hard.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's why the internet's so cool, is you can find your tribe. Like, you can find those people to help push you through. They don't have to be here. Like, I moved away from my family and friends. We all have moved away from our family and friends, and you may not talk to them all the time, but if you need them, they're there. And that's what's great about the community. If you find the right people, like, there is still, like you've talked about, I feel like I've talked to you already about this topic, but it's because I've listened to the podcast. As we've talked about, is that there are those pockets that aren't healthy, and that's in any community, that's in the work environment as well, that are just, you're going to have energy vampires that are trying to suck away your joy. Like, it just happens. But if you find the right communities with the people that are trying to make a positive impact, you too can then find your strength to make your positive impact.
Yeah, and like you said, you can meet these people on the internet. There's this really funny meme that this always reminds me about, and it says something like 1999, parents warn, kids not to get in strangers' cars, and then it's like 2009, don't meet people from the internet alone, and then it's like 2019, meet a stranger on the internet, get into their car alone, called Uber. Like, and it's so funny, but I know we were talking about, the way the workforce has evolved, and this is kind of the same thing. People were always so timid and scared to meet people on the internet, but some of the best people that I've met on the internet. I met my best friend literally through another friend that I met on the internet. So it's such an amazing thing to have nowadays. I know there are still skeptics, Mom, which I love my mom dearly, but it's a totally different generation. And, I'm sure you understand, like, our kids' generation is going to be even more different than what our generation is right now. but I feel like we have so many more resources than our parents' generation did, and it opens up a whole new world, basically.
It really does. And the funny part is at the networking session last night, it was just so great. So there was like a veteran spouse there, and she was just talking about her career journey, and she like was a hustler. Like, I mean, everywhere they moved, she had a job. Like, she made it work. And that was in a time where you don't have the internet to be proactive about meeting people ahead of time. That your networks are probably not as connected because you just don't have the resources that you have now between, text messaging and keeping in contact in so many different mediums. And she's like, I used to have to mail in my resume.
Oh my gosh.
And so when you think about that, we are blessed, like she's
Wow.
like, I mailed in my resume and I went down to the office and I sat there until I found the person who was the person I was supposed to get my resume to.
Oh
and it's like,
my gosh.
the perspective that puts it into is that if you really want something, you can have it, and it's so much easier to have it. Now, don't go stalking people. Like, we need to be mindful of how aggressive we are. But it's definitely from a career networking, mentorship, relationship building. We have the capacity to do that in such spades. Like, it's just amazing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can mailed in a resume. Like, our kids are not even going to know probably what the mail system is by then. So,
Yeah.
But it's just crazy to me, the amount of resources that are truly out there that military spouses especially aren't taking advantage of. And I don't know if they're not taking advantage of it because they're scared, they're worried they're going to be judged, or they just don't particularly know how to find the resource that they need.
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of all of those things. I think, right, the hardest part about the jump is the leap, right?
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, that fear of the unknown, of what this is going to bring, how this is going to change the dynamic of the family, sometimes people don't want to change because they don't want to upset the apple cart. So there's probably a little bit of that, like, my husband or my wife met me as this person, and now I'm saying that I want to evolve into something else. That sometimes can be a hard balance.
Ooh, that's a really great point.
Right? Like, so, that I think is partially part of it. I think the other part is that the places we go for the resources aren't always timely or up to date. So going to your local, Airman Readiness Center, or each base calls it something different, AFRC for other people. There's a resource, family resource groups. They have resources in there, but sometimes it's just the flyer that they've got maybe 3 weeks ago, and that's jobs no longer available, or those resources have already passed.
Yeah.
And so I think there's that, and that's one of the or you don't have time to go. Like, tell me about what time you have during the day to go by base to go look for resources.
Yes, absolutely. That is one thing as a military spouse that kind of drives me nuts, because things like links and other resources like that, generally their meetings are like on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And even though I'm already a working spouse and maybe I'm not going to links to find, a job or look for a career or anything like that, maybe I want the other resources that they're providing as a working spouse. I can't do that unless I take off work, but then I'm losing money, and then it starts this whole domino effect. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that drives me nuts about those things, but it also makes me really thankful for people like you who are online, who can help at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Friday.
Yeah. And like, one of our things that we combat with as a key spouse group is we have, working military spouses that are helping with the group. And if we have incoming spouses that are coming in, they have these meetings during the daytime because that's convenient for the service members, but that's not convenient to the people that are going to come and support them. And then if they're not encouraging them to come, then what's happened is now you've kind of the credibility of the event or how it's supposed to go then loses its luster, and the people that are helping support it don't want to give up their time to do that. Like, I'm giving up money to come in and volunteer, but if no one's showing up, where's the value in that?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to talk about a little bit about what the Key Spouse Group is, because there are probably a few listeners that are going to listen to this podcast or that are listening to this podcast that maybe don't know exactly what that is. And I think it's a great resource. And I think a lot of it, sometimes the great resources that we have available aren't known to the spouses, and maybe they know of it, but they don't know about it. So they don't see the value in why they should, invest in this particular event.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys Marine Corps?
Yes.
Do they call it Key Spouse in the Marine Corps?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
Okay, no worries. So in the Air Force, the program's called Key Spouse, and sometimes I just throw it around like everybody knows what it is, and I realize that this is different for every group, but every military branch. And each military branch has a group of volunteers, usually a spouse group, that's led by an officer's spouse, because I want to be very mindful of, we have male spouses that help with these things. And the group is dedicated to help with resources. So in the Air Force, we call it Key Spouse. And what our goal is to make sure that whatever is going on, the tools and, the events, the programs that are available to you. And that could be during deployment. There's a monthly dinner that is held for deployment families. And making sure that those resources are reached out to those families, because not everybody is aware of these events. Or, hey, we're going to have HeartLink, which tells you about the base and the local area and what you need to know and different resources that are available to you and when those events are going to be. It could be anything from, hey, this is going on in base, we're having a fun run, to this week the pool's closed. That's kind of our responsibility as a Key Spouse Group, is to make sure that you guys are getting the tools you need. Recently, we had an incoming family. The spouse was moving first. The husband was remote and then was going to meet them here, and they didn't have dishes yet because their stuff was in limbo. Of course, the PCS limbo.
Oh, yes. Such a real thing.
Right? And she's just like, I just need some, pots and pans. Can I rent them from Outdoor Rec, or is there a place that I could rent them from? And we kind of all collaborated together to give her resources and say, not necessarily are you giving your stuff, but it's more like, hey, there's a Dollar Tree that's up the street that you could probably buy some cheap pots and pans and just tide you over until your stuff comes. Or we found out that, Outdoor Rec does have kitchen stuff that is for rent. So it's working with the first sergeants, it's working with the commander's spouse, as well as spouses of whatever unit you're in. So I'm the Key Spouse for my unit, and then rolls up to the squadron.
Okay, that
level.
makes sense. Yeah.
And then we are just there to facilitate for resources. And we man a Facebook group so that people have a place to link to before they're coming, or if they're leaving, or if there's this weird thing with remote tours, is that they're no longer connected to, the spouse is no longer connected to the outgoing base, but there isn't really a Key Spouse group in the remote. So where do those people lie? And we kind of still assist with letting them know about resources and making sure they're aware of what they need.
Well, yeah,
before they move to their next base.
They still need resources. Just because, they're remote doesn't mean they don't need resources. Every spouse needs resources. And I think that is an amazing group. that is available to our spouses. But like I said, a lot of spouses probably don't know that that's available. And I know for every branch it is different. For the Marine Corps, I know as like a unit, we have the Family Readiness Group, or FRG. It used to be the Family Readiness Officer, the FRO, and now they changed it. I think it's the FRG. But they're, basically for the unit in particular, like you said you are for your unit, they're basically the same thing for our spouses' units in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, it's a great resource if you know about it and if you are open to meeting people. We've had groups that have gotten a bad rap, and so sometimes people are not interested in participating. But I've always had a great experience. I've met some of my best military friends through being a key spouse. Our commander's wife, who helps run the group, is just a ray of sunshine, and just every time you see her, she grabs you and pulls you in for a hug. And how do you not love that as part of your leadership, to have such a warm welcome? And they have been such key members to making sure that the group does a really good job. Like, they don't deal with gossip. Like, they just aren't, they're not about that. They're like, we have a job to do to make sure the families are supported, and that's the focus. And so, and they're very good about, like, we understand, because she works as a nurse, and so they're like, we understand about the time commitment. Like, we understand you give what you can.
Yeah.
And so that makes it a lot easier to be a part of the group, because, yeah, I'm going to be at these functions anyway, so why not be at the functions in a supportive manner? But if you said you needed like 15 hours a month, I can't give you that.
Right.
But if you say, come show up, help, set up, or stay behind, or introduce yourself to the spouses, I can do that all day.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really funny that you make a point about you as a spouse are basically, in charge of your unit, and the spouses in your unit, and making sure that they have the support that they need. It's very different in the Marine Corps, because most of the time, those people, the family, the FRG, they are actually Marines. And you made a point about, the groups getting a bad rap and people not wanting to be involved in it. And it's definitely the same in the Marine Corps, because honestly, if it is a Marine that is in charge, and no offense to any males out there, but particularly males, female spouses are not going to really feel comfortable reaching out to you being like, hey, do you know where I can get some pots and pans? Like, we know that they already have their job that they're doing in the Marine Corps, and then this is kind of like a voluntold position that, hey, you're going to be the family readiness person. And so there's not usually a lot of involvement. However, in this particular unit that my husband's with now, we have a lot of spouses that basically take it upon themselves to make sure that the spouses are taken care of. One of the spouses started a deployment buddy program for everybody in the unit. It was optional to participate. You filled out a little survey. She matched people up. And it's just a really fun activity to keep everybody engaged. You can keep it a secret who your buddy is, or you can tell them. But every month they get, a little gift, and based on the information that you sent in, and it's really fun. But to have a male Marine do something like that, we just know isn't going to happen. And I think that's why these other spouses have stepped up to basically partake in that role.
Yeah, I think it's easier to relate to somebody that's like you, right? Like, that's going through the same things you're going through, and it's hard to be able to say. It's in the working environment too. It's kind of hard, because you have people who are just they're ignorant to your needs, and it's not always just because. Okay, Oliver. Shh. And it's not always because it's intentional, right? At my main employment place, so I work for a travel company, And we are, like, my goal for 2019 is to develop out the military program. We already kind of started it, but we stumbled upon it. It wasn't like something that was intentional. And so now we're trying to become more intentional about what that program looks like, because we know that there's such synergies between what we do and the military. So, and we can employ a lot of military spouses because we have that bandwidth to do it. But some of the things that I have to do to realign the expectations is that, no, it's not going to be military spouses only do call center jobs. Like, it's going to be other jobs we can incorporate. These are educated employees that, regardless of their status, their military status, they can bring wealth to the company. And so it's, for me, that's kind of the unintentional ignorance is what I'm trying to clear up.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's such an amazing thing. He's killing me. So cute, but I totally get it. No, but I think it's an amazing thing that you will be able to employ those military spouses, and they are going to be empowered, and they are going to have amazing resources for them.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think overall, like, the long-term goal. All right.
I couldn't love this anymore right now.
Gosh. Go find your brother and him with something that's not going to hurt him. Take your iPad and go. How about this? So,
right? I know. My kid's on YouTube right now.
So anybody that is good at parenting, I would love some advice, because I'm good at the job thing, not so good at the parent thing.
Agreed, girl. Agreed. maybe we could have a military spouse on the podcast just to do an episode about parenting.
I'm like, they are alive. Nobody's dead. Like, I'm doing a good job.
That's right. That is so right.
So for me, like, when I, like, okay, I'm not going to leave you. He's my Velcro baby. So, he can't be far away from me. And when I had my first son, I was so upset because he was such a daddy's boy. And I was like, he doesn't want anything to do with me. And then I had the second one, and he is mama's boy to the max. And now I sometimes want to just pull my skin off and give it to him.
Right? Now you're like, oh, I wanted this. I don't get it.
This is what I get. This is what you get.
Yep. Exactly.
So I look back at my life, you know how you reflect back on, like, wow, now I understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. So when I was in school, like, I had this dream that I was going to make every environment like Google. Like, I'm going to be this cool consultant that's going to come in, and I'm going to make your office environment so productive. And now I look at myself and I go, I could still do that, right? But the way that I'm doing that is by impacting the workforce and including military spouses in that mission.
Yes.
Oh, mister, that was, like, really good, that what I said, and then you just involved your intentional, you just, like, try to mess me up. Throw me off my game. Where do you want to go? Miss Jenna doesn't want to listen to you cry forever. You want to go bug your Bubba?
Bubba.
Yeah.
Bubba, oh my gosh. Stop.
Your feet, yes. Okay.
All right.
We've
got a limited amount of time.
Okay.
If there's anything,
that.
no, it's totally fine. If there's anything else that you want to say, you can go ahead and say it now. And then I'm probably gonna, and then I'll just ask, if people want to contact you, what's a good way to contact you. And then in the description, I'll also link whatever you, like an email address, Instagram, whatever you want me to link, on Apple Podcast.
Okay, sounds good. So I think, that for military spouses, just be confident in your abilities. Remember, you're agile. You have a skill set that others don't have. Like, having to move every 2 to 3 years is, the coined time frame, but that has made you so adaptable. It has made you figure out how to do a lot with little information, little detail, which is very much a quality that employers are looking for. So I don't think that you should limit yourself. I think what happens is if you've been out of the workforce or you have some gaps on your resume or some, frequent jobs on your resume, that we then start to doubt our abilities. Don't doubt your abilities. You're capable of doing whatever it is that you do. And you have to remember back to when that if you've had kids and that point where you were like, my brain doesn't work anymore, it doesn't function, nobody's going to value anything I have to say, those things come back. Like, we're wonderful, strong creatures, and we're learning and changing and evolving all the time. So just don't doubt your abilities.
Yes, all such amazing points. And I just want to say thank you again for joining us. You have been such a wealth of knowledge and such a breath of fresh air, basically, to know that there are great spouses out there that are doing great things and empowering other spouses. So if people want to reach out to you, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
I think the best way to is social media. I think if you have an Instagram page, just look for me. It's Dependent.Work. I also have an email address. It's tia@Dependent.Work. If you want to email me as well. I think those modes are probably the most informational.
Perfect. And I will be sure to link your Instagram page and put your email in the description of this episode. And again, thank you so much for being on this episode. I have had such a wonderful time with you. I can definitely tell we're going to be friends for a while. And again, thank you for getting up early with me this morning and doing this. It's been wonderful.
No, not a problem, Jenna. Anytime.